One day, as I was waiting for my grandson John to visit, I heard the sound of a police car outside. Feeling a sense of unease, my smartphone rang.
Nancy! John was in an accident and has been rushed to a hospital in the neighboring town.
There was no way I could immediately process the words of my son-in-law, Jason, who had hurriedly hung up the phone. Not knowing what else to do, I quickly called a taxi to head to the hospital where John had been taken.
Nancy, I'm glad you made it safely.
How's John?
He's in the operating room now. They told me his life is not in danger.
Really? That's a relief. A few hours later, the doctor and a nurse came out of the operating room to inform us that the surgery had gone well. My anxiety and tension immediately turned to relief, and together with Jason, I thanked the doctor multiple times. The doctor simply replied,
"No problem,"
and walked away. While the doctor left, the nurse stayed behind.
Here are John's belongings from the time of the accident.
Saying this, the nurse handed us John's tote bag and smartphone.
It seems John was on his way back from the supermarket.
Jason showed me the contents. The bag was filled with ingredients needed for making hamburgers, such as onions, ground meat, and eggs. Hey.
Yes?
I felt something was off about the items John had purchased. Why did John? I am Nancy. A long time ago, my husband passed away, and I lived alone at that time. But I was not lonely.
Grandma, is this amount of potatoes okay?
Yes, it's fine. You've really gotten good at it. That's because my grandson John often came to visit me. On that day, he came to ask for cooking lessons, and we were making soup together. At first, his knife skills were clumsy, but now they've become remarkably good.
Oh, Dad just finished work. He says he'll be here in about 30 minutes.
Oh, Jason is early today. Let's all eat together then. John's father Jason was my son-in-law. When John came to visit, it's become a routine for Jason to come over for dinner after work. This was because Jason's wife, my daughter Emma, disappeared a few years ago. Emma was a kind child, and she always prepared meals for me when I came home from work. When she became a high school student, she started a part-time job and always tried to give money to the household, saying thank you. I couldn't accept that, but for my birthday, she bought me a very nice bag and I still cherish it. Emma married Jason, and when John was in elementary school, she disappeared without any warning. We filed a missing person report, but the police dismissed it as a family matter. We searched for her ourselves, but never found her. Where was she? What was she doing? Was she even alive? At that time, I was overwhelmed with a mix of anxiety, worry, and the responsibility of needing to properly scold her as a mother.
I'm home.
Welcome back, Dad. It's already done.
Jason came home, and John greeted him happily. The soup, which John had chopped the vegetables for and seasoned, was simmering nicely. Jason took one look and said it looked delicious, patting John on the head.
Oh, Dad. Stop that. I'm in high school now.
John frowned and pushed his hand away, but he didn't seem entirely displeased. Watching the two of them, I felt a warm smile, but also a bit of guilt. Where could Emma have gone, leaving such treasures behind?
Let's eat. Delicious.
John had been waiting with an empty stomach, so he couldn't wait for Jason to sit down and started eating first. Seeing him eat so heartily always filled me with a warm feeling. As a growing high schooler, he needed to eat a lot. After Jason sat down, I prayed and began to eat as well. The potatoes were well seasoned, fluffy, and very tasty. To add some color to the table, I also made a salad, though it only had greens since all three of us dislike tomatoes.
John, how's school lately? Have you gotten used to high school yet?
Yeah. It's normal now. I'm used to commuting, and I have friends, so no problems. Oh, Grandma, let's have Hamburg steak tomorrow. I want Western food.
Tomorrow? All right. Don't you want to hang out with your friends?
No, studying cooking is more important.
John used to visit about once a week, but the visits increased gradually, and he came over almost every day after school at that time. When I asked about club activities, he said he wasn't in any. No matter how many times I asked why, he only said he wanted to study cooking and wouldn't say more. I think he should enjoy his once-in-a-lifetime high school experience more, but this must be John's way of being considerate. Thanks to him, we could eat together as a family and have lively meals, except for one empty seat. One day, John sent a message during the day.
I'll come at 5 p.m. to make dinner today.
He usually texted in the evening, so I wondered if school ended early today. Maybe he was coming after hanging out with friends, I thought casually. Since I was going to be home all day, it wasn't a problem, so I replied, all right. However, evening came and John didn't show up. Even if he was late, he was usually here by 6 p.m., but it was already past 7 p.m. I worried and tried to call John, but there was no answer. I decided to step outside, and from a distance, I heard police sirens. With a sense of foreboding, I overheard the neighbors talking nearby. A high school student, traffic accident? No way, it couldn't be. The bad feeling grew, sending chills down my spine, and I felt dizzy. At that moment, my cell phone vibrated in my pocket. With trembling hands, I looked at the screen. It was a call from Jason. Hello?
Nancy! I just heard that John was in an accident and has been rushed to the hospital in the neighboring town. I'm heading there now. I need you to come too. The address is...
Jason hurriedly hung up the phone. My legs gave out, and I sat down on the ground. First my husband passed away, then Emma disappeared, and next was John. I was terrified by the thought of losing everyone around me. I wished it had been me in the accident instead of John. Then, I could have reunited with everyone and lived happily with my family. These thoughts kept flooding my mind, and I was horrified by my own thinking. I realized that my heart was reaching its limit. I couldn't bear to lose another loved one. Gathering all my strength, I stood up, called a taxi, and headed to the hospital Jason mentioned. I shut the door on the dark thoughts that had surfaced earlier and prayed solely for John's safety. The journey to the hospital, which should have taken about 10 minutes, felt like hours to me. I quickly walked from the taxi to the waiting room Jason had mentioned. Opening the door, I saw Jason sitting on a chair, sighing and staring at the floor. When he noticed I had entered, he looked up.
Nancy, I'm glad you made it safely.
Jason said. Yes, but what about John? I asked.
He's in the operating room now. They said his life isn't in danger.
Jason explained. Really? That's a relief. I sighed in relief and sat down next to Jason. Looking closely, I noticed his suit was wrinkled, showing that he had hurried over here.
I'm sorry for calling you over so suddenly. I couldn't bear the wait alone.
Jason said. I understand. I couldn't just stay at home doing nothing either. Don't worry about it, I replied.
Thank you.
He said. I hope the surgery goes well. It was already dark, and the hallway lights were off. The red and surgery lamp glowed eerily, heightening my anxiety. I don't know how much time had passed, but the red light went off when my hands were chilled. After a few minutes, the door to the operating room opened, and the doctor in charge and a nurse appeared. Jason stood up and rushed over to the doctor.
Doctor, how is John?
He hasn't regained consciousness yet. But he's going to be fine. I don't think there will be any lasting after effects. John did very well.
Really? That's great. Thank you so much.
Jason bowed his head. I also stood up and bowed deeply.
Oh. No. No need to thank me. He will be hospitalized here until he regains consciousness and recovers to a certain extent. So please prepare his belongings.
Yes, understood. Thank you very much.
The doctor lightly waved and left the room. His figure was very reassuring, and I felt confident that John would be in good hands from now on.
Excuse me, these are the belongings John had with him when he had the accident.
The nurse handed John's tote bag and smartphone to Jason, said a quick,
I'm going to go.
and followed the doctor.
It looks like John was on his way back from the supermarket.
Jason showed me the contents of the bag with a sad smile. Inside were onions, ground meat, eggs, and other ingredients needed for making Hamburg steak. And on top of everything was a slightly squashed bright red tomato. I noticed something strange. Hey, why did John buy a tomato? We don't use it in Hamburg steak, and none of us can eat it. John, Jason, and I all disliked tomatoes. The only one in the family who could eat tomatoes was Emma. As this question crossed my mind, a notification popped up on John's smartphone. It was a chat notification from a social media app, showing the profile picture of the other person. However, the phone was locked with a password, so we couldn't see the contents. A friend, perhaps?
I recognize this photo.
Jason seemed to have a sudden realization.
Could it be?
He tried to unlock the phone. Hey, it's not right to look without permission. Ignoring my words, Jason tapped 0621 in sequence. The phone unlocked. That number is
Emma's birthday. John has been asking a lot about Emma lately. I thought it might be.
I tapped on the recent notification to see the content.
This park in the picture was Emma's favorite. The three of us used to go there often on weekends.
As we scrolled through the chat history, Jason seemed to confirm his suspicion.
This person John was chatting with is Emma.
No way, it can't be. Jason showed me a decisive conversation.
You said you had a son, right?
Yes. He's about your age, I think.
I'm sorry for hiding it all this time. My name is John. After talking to you so much, I'm sure. You're Emma, my mother, aren't you?
John. Is it really you, John?
At first, Emma was skeptical, but as she listened to more details, she became convinced. Their conversation grew more and more animated, discussing recent school events, Jason, and me. However, Emma repeatedly insisted that John must not tell us about her. Emma sounded very lively in the conversation, which was reassuring as a parent, but it only deepened the mystery of why she disappeared.
This is the latest conversation.
Jason operated the screen again and showed me yesterday's and today's conversation.
School ends in the morning today, so can I come to your house?
Sure, but keep it a secret from everyone.
Yay! I'll come over in the early afternoon then.
Okay. I'll be waiting.
This explained why John bought a tomato. John had been in contact with Emma through social media for some time, had confirmed she was his mother, and was planning to meet her today. He brought a tomato, which was her favorite. Indeed, the place where John had the accident was in the opposite direction from my house.
John? It's getting late. What happened? Are you okay?
Several messages like this had come since early afternoon today. And the latest notification read,
I'm sorry. I suddenly felt unwell and am going to the hospital now. Can we reschedule?
This was the end of their conversation today. The news of John's accident and Emma's survival left me feeling both happy and sad, with my emotions in turmoil.
According to this profile, it seems Emma lives nearby.
Really?
Yes. If she went to the hospital today, it might be this one.
Indeed, this is the only large hospital around here. Hearing Jason's thoughts, I felt a sudden rush of warmth. I might be able to see my daughter for the first time in years. John would surely be happy too. But first, I needed to confirm the facts with John. I went home, praying for John's recovery and Emma's safety, and fell asleep. For the next few days, we took turns watching over John and searching for Emma's whereabouts. When we asked at the reception desk, they refused to give us any patient information, so we asked around among the hospitalized patients directly. Then, one day,
Nancy.
Jason came rushing into John's hospital room, out of breath.
I found out. Emma is admitted to room 505 in this hospital. It seems she's been in and out of the hospital for the past few years.
What? Is she sick?
I don't know yet. But
Jason slowly faced John, who had yet to regain consciousness. He gently held John's limp hand.
finally, the day has come. We can see Emma. Right, John? You want to see Mom too, don't you? Thank you for finding her.
Jason repeatedly murmured thank you to John and shed tears.
Nancy, I'm going to Emma's room now. What about you?
Go ahead. I'll stay with John.
Thank you. I'll go then.
With his nose slightly red, Jason left the room. To be honest, I wanted to see Emma as soon as possible too, but I held back. After all, Jason had been working so hard for my daughter and had endured so much loneliness. As a mother, I was genuinely happy that someone cared so deeply for her. I shouldn't interfere with their reunion. As I was thinking this and tending to the flowers in John's room, I heard a faint voice.
Grandma.
I couldn't believe it and turned my gaze to the bed. John's eyes were slightly open. Seeing this, I immediately rushed to his side. John. I'm so glad. Wait, I need to call the nurse right away.
Dad, where is he?
Oh, right. I need to contact Jason too.
Where is he?
He's at work right now. He had a meeting he couldn't miss.
I see.
John murmured and smiled. But he'll come as soon as he hears you've woken up. I don't know why I lied about Jason being at work. But I felt I needed to confirm things about Emma with John first. It pained me a little to make John talk right after waking up. Then the doctor and nurse came in to examine him, so I had to leave the room. Shortly after, Jason arrived.
Is it true he's awake?
Yes, the doctor is with him now.
That's great, really great.
Looking closely, Jason's face was even redder than before, and his eyes were slightly swollen. How was Emma?
Well, I did get to see her, but...
But what? Jason hesitated and avoided meeting my eyes. Then, he resigned and murmured.
Emma doesn't have much time left.
What? No.
She's been suffering from a severe illness for about 5 years, and it's a miracle she's still alive. They said the day John had his accident, she was also brought in by emergency services.
Jason smiled sadly and painfully. To finally reunite, only to have to say goodbye so soon. How heartbreaking.
As soon as we met, Emma scolded me. She said she left because she didn't want to cause any trouble.
Emma is a kind child.
I took advantage of her kindness. But I should have realized it. I failed as a husband.
Don't blame yourself. She did it because she wanted you to be happy. I'm sure of it.
Yes, you're right.
I shared Jason's feelings of guilt. Emma was so kind and always put others before herself. That's why we needed to pay more attention to her. We should have searched harder, like John did. But it's too late for regrets now. So, I decided to make the remaining time meaningful for Emma and John. With this resolve, I clenched my fists tightly. A few days later, John had completely regained consciousness and was now focused on rehabilitation.
Hospitals are so boring. I'm already feeling better, and I want to go back to school soon.
He said these carefree words. I thought it was about time to bring it up and started to talk about Emma. By the way, John, where were you heading that day? It was in the opposite direction of my house.
Oh, that. I was going to the supermarket in the next town. It's big and cheap, but it's far from Grandma's house and hard to get to.
John answered, clearly avoiding eye contact. John, please tell me the truth.
The truth? What are you talking about, Grandma?
I'm sorry, John, but we know everything. You were going to see Emma that day, weren't you? John's shoulders twitched, and he looked at me wide-eyed in surprise.
How did you know? Did you go through my phone without permission?
He glared at me as if to say,
How dare you?
I was a bit taken aback since I had never seen him look at me that way, but I couldn't back down now. I'm sorry about that. A notification came while you were asleep, and so...
That doesn't mean you can just... No, it's not your fault, Grandma. I'm sorry for raising my voice.
John slumped his shoulders and looked out the window.
When I was in middle school, Dad was often tormented at night, calling out Emma, Emma. So I thought I had to do something and started searching.
John began to speak in a halting manner.
I didn't think I would find anything. Honestly, It was a miracle that I found Mom's account. After seeing her usual posts and chatting, I was convinced.
Why were you convinced?
Mom has a scar on her wrist, right?
Yes, she got burned with a frying pan when she was young, and the scar never went away even as an adult. When Emma was in middle school, she greeted me with bandages on her wrist after I came home from work, which shocked me. I rushed her to a dermatologist who prescribed an ointment, but it resulted in a permanent scar. She laughed it off, saying it was nothing to worry about, but it left a huge sense of guilt in my heart.
There was a photo of a drink posted on her account, and the scar was visible. Plus, her hobbies and her love for tomatoes.
John spoke with a bit of pride in his voice. Children's reasoning abilities and initiative can sometimes surpass those of adults.
That day, after we talked a lot and confirmed things, I went to see Mom. On the way, a car crashed into me.
So, the tomatoes were for?
Yeah, they were for Mom. She ate tomatoes every day. So, I wanted to bring her some nutritious ones. Sorry for keeping it a secret.
It's all right, I said as I gently patted John's head. He murmured something about already being a high school student, but I pretended not to hear it.
I wanted to tell you and Dad earlier, but Mom insisted I shouldn't. Maybe she didn't even want to see me.
That's not true.
It is. She seemed like she was hiding something. But I still want to see her.
Seeing the determination in his eyes, I felt a bit intimidated. I haven't met Emma yet. If she left to avoid causing trouble, visiting her now might undermine her years of effort. That's why Jason has been visiting Emma repeatedly without telling me. Emma has been in poor health ever since she was rushed to the hospital. If Emma wants to hide her condition from John, I shouldn't take him to see her.
Hey, what's Dad doing today?
He's at work.
That's a lie. I know he took a day off. He's visiting Mom, isn't he? Is Mom hospitalized here?
Why do you think that? I broke into a cold sweat at John's question. My response could change the outcome for my grandchild.
I overheard Dad talking to a nurse in the hallway. Please, I want to see Mom too. Take me to her.
But...
Please, Grandma. You want to see her too, right? Let's go together. Oh, and don't forget the tomatoes.
I was speechless at John's straightforward plea. And before I knew it, I found myself in front of room 505 with John and a bag of tomatoes in hand. John knocked on the door. A familiar female voice responded from inside.
Yes?
Mom.
He opened the door and immediately rushed to the woman lying on the bed. At that moment, she hid her face with the blanket. Jason, who was nearby, looked at us in surprise.
John! What are you doing here?
Mom. I'm sorry I couldn't come to you that day. I'm sorry for breaking our promise.
John, stop it. This woman. She's not Emma.
Mom, I learned a lot from Grandma because I wanted to cook delicious meals for you. I can make anything you request.
John! That's enough!
John tried to uncover the blanket while Jason desperately tried to stop him. But John touched an injured part, causing him to cry out in pain and grab his arm. Jason stopped moving, looking concerned.
Mom, why won't you look at me? I'm in high school now.
I can't let you see me like this.
I'm sorry, Mom. I knew you were sick for a long time. You tried so hard to see me that day, didn't you? You're not a burden. Please.
John slowly lifted the blanket. Jason didn't stop him anymore. There she was, undeniably Emma. Although many years had passed, her features hadn't changed. However, she was clearly emaciated, with a poor complexion, and it was obvious she wasn't well.
It's been a while, John.
She looked at John with eyes that seemed to treasure him, yet they held a hint of sadness.
You've grown up so much. Oh, please don't cry. I hid because I didn't want you to see me like this. I didn't want you to see me in such a weak state.
You're not weak. I'm sorry, Mom.
Why are you apologizing? I'm the one who should apologize. I was so surprised when you contacted me. But I was happy. I'm sorry for leaving you alone.
I wasn't alone. Dad and Grandma were there.
You're right. Thank you, Mom. I'm sorry for disappearing so suddenly.
Really, Emma? We'll have a serious talk later.
Oh no, Mom's lectures are so long.
Emma laughed as she said this. Though she looked frail, inside she was the same as always. She was still the kind, strong child she always had been. So very kind, she sacrificed everything for the sake of others. I never realized the suffering and loneliness hidden behind her smile. But now, I understand. Even though she's smiling now, when we leave, she will be alone with her regrets. She might think she shouldn't have met us. Meeting us again would leave her with lingering attachment, making the goodbye even more painful. The thought of showing us her suffering, of being a burden to us, scares her the most. Still, we have to tell her. That's the only way we can make amends for letting her fight alone for so many years. Emma, welcome back. I'm so glad to see you. We won't let you go anywhere on your own again.
Yeah.
It's okay, there's nothing to fear. You're wonderful just as you are. Let's enjoy our time together from now on, all of us.
Thank you.
Her voice was so soft it was barely audible. But it reached my ears clearly.
Oh, yeah. I brought some tomatoes for you, Mom.
The somber atmosphere brightened instantly. Indeed, the power of children is immense.
Really? Then let's all eat them together.
But everyone hates tomatoes.
Hey now, no one should have food dislikes. We're all going to overcome that right here.
With Emma's encouragement, we all ate tomatoes together. John seemed to have already overcome his dislike for tomatoes and ate them happily. Jason and I hesitated at first, but as we were forced to eat them, memories with Emma flooded back, and we all ended up crying as we ate. For the first time in my life, I thought tomatoes were delicious. After that, Emma's health improved slightly, but then quickly worsened again, repeating this cycle. A week after our reunion, Emma passed away. Until she lost consciousness, she talked a lot to make up for the time we had been apart. And until the very end, we were all together as a family. Afterward, John was discharged from the hospital and attended the funeral, able to walk normally. Following Emma's wishes, we held a family funeral, as she felt uncomfortable with large crowds. We prepared a lot of tomatoes as offerings. We explained Emma's entire story to Jason's parents and deeply apologized. They were very kind and reassured us, saying it was okay. Though there were few attendees, the funeral was not modest. Emma was a beloved daughter, cherished by everyone. After that, John and Jason moved in with me. We learned the importance of spending time together from Emma. I want to stay together forever. But I still have regrets. While I was happy to see Emma at the end, the sadness of watching her pass away before my eyes was overwhelming. Most of all, I hated myself for not knowing about her illness and being unable to do anything until the end. One day, John came to me with tomatoes and said,
I want to become a doctor, a farmer, or a culinary researcher. I want to save people like Mom if I become a doctor, grow tomatoes that made Mom feel better even for a moment, and make people smile with the cooking Grandma taught me.
John.
Watch and see what I become. So, Grandma, you have to stay healthy until then. Here, I brought you a tomato.
Saying this, he went back to his room. Children sometimes touch us deeply. But the truth is, I'm being saved by John too. Maybe I'll make some meat sauce with these tomatoes today. At some point, our family became a family that loves tomatoes. Maria handed me the letter she had read at the wedding reception. I wasn't completely clueless about the situation, but I knew I needed to say something sincere to Maria. Maria, thank you for being born. I wish your father could have seen you in your wedding attire too. Maria's personality changed dramatically after my husband Ted disappeared 15 years ago. Previously, she had been a bright and curious child, but she became timid and withdrawn. It's likely that her father's absence had something to do with it. Maria collapsed in tears upon hearing my words. I initially thought it was due to overwhelming emotions, but something seemed off. She grabbed my hand while crying, her grip so strong it might leave a bruise. Mom, I'm sorry. There's something I've been keeping quiet about. An unsettling feeling washed over me. She continued, Did Dad betray us? Her eyes held unmistakable hatred. I felt a chill run down my spine. What do you mean? I hurried back home, desperately digging up the spot Maria had indicated. The shovel hit something with a thud. Buried in the soil was a cookie can. Don't open this, I myself warned. Despite my sudden fear, I couldn't leave her to face the truth alone. I steeled myself and opened the can. Encounters come unexpectedly. It was a springtime event when I was 28 years old.
This is Mr. Ted Astrid, our new employee.
The young man introduced by my boss bowed slightly.
Starting today, teach him everything he needs to know.
With those words, he promptly headed to the meeting room. I'm Sophia Barlow. Let's start with the basics, and feel free to ask anything if you have questions. His gaze is fixed on the name tag on my chest. Are you listening? Ted? Just as I was about to pay attention, he turned a friendly smile toward me and said something unexpected.
Miss Sophia Barlow, that's a very beautiful name.
Being told this by a new employee, who was not only meeting me for the first time but also 10 years younger, caught me off guard.
Oh, I'm sorry. I blurted out something embarrassing, didn't I?
He looked more embarrassed than I did and took a seat at the desk next to mine. Seeing his profile, I noticed that his ears were bright red. Perhaps he wasn't such a bad guy after all. However, as someone in a supervisory role, I felt anxious about the initial words directed at me. Would he perform his duties properly? I wondered if I should provide guidance based on the attitude towards other senior employees. Yet, my anxiety was unfounded. He remembered what I taught him one after another, and his friendly personality proved effective in winning over clients. His earnest dedication to work made me gradually recognize his abilities. And 1 year later, when he secured a major contract on his own, we decided to celebrate by going out for a meal together.
Your teaching style was effective.
Despite his achievement, he remained humble. Although our initial impression of each other wasn't great, by that time, I had grown comfortable being around him. But now that you're so capable at work, you'll probably get even busier, I said, feeling a mix of sadness and uncertainty. Ted's response surprised me.
Even so, would you still go out to eat with me occasionally?
His reddened ears weren't solely due to alcohol. Somehow, I had a premonition. However, I couldn't respond to the feelings of my junior, who was 10 years younger than me. By that time, there will be more gatherings with people more important than me. I tried to evade, but his gaze was serious.
Ms. Barlow, I'm serious.
He leaned forward. We locked eyes for a few seconds, and I nodded. It wasn't just swept away by his momentum. Somewhere deep down, I was drawn to him. Ted Astrid, the man who would later become my husband. Things were going smoothly, and I got married around the time I turned 30. After that, we were blessed with a daughter, and the three of us lived a happy life. Or at least, that's how it was supposed to be. I'll never forget that moment, spring when my daughter Maria was 5 years old. After putting her on the kindergarten bus, I was chatting with a neighbor when my phone rang. It was a call from Mr. Johnson, my former boss whom I had only met through my husband Ted's stories since I quit my job before Maria's birth.
Hello? Ms. Barlow, no, I mean, Miss Astrid.
Mr. Johnson's voice came through the phone. And with that abrupt interruption, my life took an unexpected turn.
I'm glad to hear you're doing well. By the way, I haven't been able to get in touch with Ted. Do you know anything about him?
What? Ted was supposed to be in Hong Kong on a business trip for the past 3 days. According to my former boss, he had not been on a business trip and had not come to work since Monday of that week.
Anyway, you can try to get in touch with him yourself.
With that, he hung up the phone. Recently, Ted had been complaining that his business trips had increased. Every time he did, I would comfort and encourage him. After all, just having you listen to me makes me feel at ease. I feel all wrapped up and warm. Thanks for everything. He had said such a thing. We had both been feeling uplifted that this long trip was because he was expected to have a future, and that he would surely get a promotion in the next round of reviews. Where in the world had my husband, who had taken Monday off to pack for the next day's insistence, gone? After hanging up the phone from my former boss, I cut off my chat with a neighbor and returned home to try to call Ted's cell phone. But it was not turned on. The announcement echoed emphatically. I had never been unable to reach him before. I wondered if he had been involved in an accident or incident somewhere. Suddenly driven by anxiety, I called all the contacts on my cell phone. Ted's parents, his siblings, and every friend I knew. But no one knew where Ted was. The days that followed were so painful that I don't even want to recall them. My in-laws suggested that I file a missing persons report for Ted, but I never found a single clue. I shamelessly asked my former boss for help, reapplied for a job at my old place of employment, and worked as if to fill the void left by my husband's absence. But at the same time, my daughter Maria's smile began to diminish. My life was completely different than it had been before, even though I was working shorter hours. For Maria, her father was gone, and she had less time to spend with her mother. Her loneliness was painfully obvious, but we both had to get over it. I was uncomfortable because I was treated within the company as the wife whose husband had run away from her and the poor woman who had to clean up the mess. Only my colleagues, who had known me for a long time, treated me normally, but I could see a wavering pity in their eyes. I gritted my teeth, even though it almost drove me mentally to the edge. I acted as cheerfully as possible in front of Maria. I did not want her to feel anxious or lonely. I wanted Maria to have a life without any inconvenience, and that was all I wanted. When she was in elementary school and getting used to life with just the two of us, I made a request to my boss.
As long as it's not too much for you.
He was probably concerned about me, but I could only thank him in a clerical way because I had lost faith in anyone at that time. Then I started an online store as a side business. 15 years have passed since then. I muttered to myself as I watched the cherry blossoms begin to bloom. "Mom, what's wrong?" Maria, who was walking in front of me, looked back. The image of her in my memory overlapped with her face. "Don't tell me you're still nervous, Mom." She laughed mischievously. "No way. I haven't been nervous since the beginning." I made a playful show of it and we walked side by side laughing. Today we were meeting Maria and her fiancé's family. Maria, now a fully grown woman, had met her fiancé at the city hall where she had started working after graduating from college. She had graduated from college and started working as a public servant, so it would have been better to get married a little later. Maria was only 23 years old. The day I was first introduced to him, I blurted it out, but Maria said it matter-of-factly. "Even you had a gut feeling when you married my dad, didn't you?" I had a complicated feeling as my own black history was dredged up, but it was indeed true. No matter what anyone says, I will marry this man. Once I made up my mind, I would go straight ahead. Her character was just like mine. If it looks like you're going to fail, come back to our house as soon as possible. It won't come to that. We enjoyed such conversations many times during the days leading up to the wedding. A few months later, Maria's wedding took place. I watched from a distant seat as my daughter was surrounded by many congratulations. Toward the end of the reception, it was time for the standard bridal letter to the parents. I thought I had told her I didn't want that part because it was too embarrassing. Even though she had said she wouldn't do it either. I couldn't have tears in my eyes in front of so many people. No matter how much sympathy and comfort I had received since Ted's disappearance, I had come this far without crying in public. Let me play the strong mother who never cries, no matter what, until the very end. With such determination in my heart, I stood on the stage without any prompting. To my beloved mother. Maria began to read the letter. She began by telling me about the time when Ted was still around, how she missed him when he disappeared and she had less time to spend with me, how she started helping me a lot to support me when I was absorbed in my work, her adolescent rebellion, and how grateful she was to have lived an unencumbered life through high school and college. All the events described in the letter, and more than that, the casual days we spent together, came back to me as if it were only yesterday. I will never cry. I made eye contact with Maria and was about to laugh with her, as we both always do, when Maria's voice stopped. I looked at her and saw my daughter crying in her beautiful wedding dress. Seeing her again, she was so beautiful, I felt as if she were a different person. Maria was so young and had always remained a child in my mind. But after today, every day will be different from the one before. When did she become such a beautiful and wonderful lady? I can vividly remember everything that has happened, but she seems to have already gone beyond my reach as she cries while reading my letter to me. Then suddenly tears spilled from my eyes, and they poured out one after another. The tears were a mixture of being proud of my daughter who had become a full-fledged person, wishing her eternal happiness, and feeling the loneliness of being alone in the future. After the wedding reception was over, I made my way to the bride's waiting room. Maria, who was taking a break, came running up to me. "I never thought you would cry, Mom." In all the years we had lived together, I had never cried in front of her, no matter how painful it was. She seemed surprised that I had cried. "I told you not to read your letter to me." To hide my embarrassment, I intentionally pretended to be angry. But Maria, who usually gets into my groove, had a mysterious look on her face. Then she handed me the letter she had read at the reception. I am not so air-headed as to make a joke here. I must say something to Maria in all seriousness. "Maria, thank you for being born. I wish your father could have seen you in your finest moment." After Ted disappeared, Maria's personality underwent a drastic change. Before that, she was a bright and curious child, but she became timid and withdrawn. It was likely related to her father's absence. She wondered if she was an unwanted child, if her existence was the reason her father was no longer there. To avoid feeling unnecessary or unwanted, she began to carefully observe people's reactions and moods. Once Maria realized this, I showered her with affection, ensuring she didn't feel anxious. By the time she reached adulthood, she had returned to her cheerful self. Today was a special day for her, and I didn't want to see her sad. I hoped she would focus on the future rather than being trapped by the past. For me, Maria's birth was the greatest happiness. Surely, her father, who lives on in Maria's memories, had eagerly awaited this day. That was the message I desperately wanted to convey. However, when Maria heard those words, she suddenly broke down in tears. She seemed to be deeply moved, but something was off. While crying, she gripped my hand with such force that I feared it might leave a bruise. "Mom, I'm sorry. There's something I've kept silent about for a long time." An unpleasant premonition washed over me. I didn't want to hear what came next. But my hopes were dashed. Maria slowly revealed the truth. "Mom, did Dad betray us?" Her eyes held unmistakable hatred. I felt my blood run cold. "What do you mean? Even if it were true, how did Maria come to know such a thing?" Of course Maria understood that Ted had disappeared, but where did he go and why was he gone? I didn't even know those things. For a long time, I wasn't sure when to tell you. But I didn't want you to be alone with the secret once I was gone. Apparently, the secret was buried in a flower bed in the garden of the house. I'm sorry I didn't tell you until today. At that moment, the groom came into our waiting room after changing his clothes. He was surprised to see Maria crying in pain because she was so sorry for me. I understand. It's okay. After briefly explaining the situation to him, I left Maria to him and ran out of the room. It takes 20 minutes by train from the hotel where the wedding was held to my home. Without caring about my appearance, I I ran to the station and squeezed through the crowd to catch the train. The train felt slower than usual. I tried to calm my frustrated self multiple times, but it didn't work. Even after getting off the train, I continued running and finally reached home. Despite being out of breath, I desperately dug up the spot Maria had specified. The shovel hit something with a thud. Buried in the soil was a cookie can. I knew I shouldn't open it. Suddenly, fear gripped me. But I couldn't burden Maria alone. I reminded myself not to avert my eyes from the truth and opened the can. Inside were several photographs. Ted and a heavily made-up woman were captured in each one. As I examined them, I discovered intimate photos of the two entangled in passion. Instinctively, I looked away. Could this be the reason Maria mentioned for Ted's disappearance? For a while, I remained crouched in the garden, unable to move. Why would something like this be buried here? The cold night air still enveloped me. The next day, when Maria returned home, I asked her for the truth. It came from Dad's desk. Was it the same desk we had kept in the house for a while after Ted disappeared? I had thoroughly searched it for any clues. I've also examined that desk, I replied, my voice still shaky and unintentionally accusatory. Maria explained the situation with an apologetic tone. Ted disappeared, and when Maria saw me rummaging through his desk, she assumed there was something there. Although she didn't know what it was, she desperately searched through the contents of the desk. Eventually, she found an envelope hidden deep in the bottom drawer. I thought this could help Mom. When she opened the envelope, the same photographs emerged. Young Maria couldn't fully comprehend what was happening in those pictures, but they made her feel incredibly uncomfortable. She felt she shouldn't show me these photos, so she hid them in the cookie can where she kept her toys. I intended to keep this from you, Mom. But what if you found it after I left? It was too heavy a burden for a child to bear alone. To think she had been hiding this all along, I had believed I was protecting her, but perhaps it was the other way around. I'm sorry, Maria. I whispered, my anger toward Ted welling up. To leave such cruel evidence for the family I abandoned. It was a feeling of boiling anger at his irresponsibility. Even if I let my emotions take over in anger, nothing would begin. No, in this case, it should end properly. I headed to the detective agency with the photograph. I had struggled so much to find Ted's whereabouts until now. But based on that photo, the detectives easily pinpointed Ted's location, a tower apartment towering near a certain station, visible in the photo. They staked out the place and confirmed Ted and the woman coming and going. And they even determined the room number for me. They said Ted frequently used food delivery services, so I decided to impersonate a delivery person and sneak into the apartment building. When I rang the intercom at the auto-locked entrance, I heard a familiar voice. After giving the delivery company's name, the automatic door opened with a polite please. The elevator ascended rapidly to the upper floors. My heart raced, and nausea washed over me. It wasn't too late to turn back. Despite questioning myself repeatedly, I walked all the way to the door where Ted and the woman were likely to be. With trembling hands, I pressed the intercom button, adjusting my face mask and pulling my cap down low.
Hi.
Once again, I heard a familiar voice through the intercom. Delivery. Nerves got the best of me, and I accidentally stumbled over my words. What kind of delivery was this? Surely, he'd find it suspicious. But I couldn't say anything more. What should I do? Just as I considered fleeing, I heard the click of the door unlocking.
Did Eve order something, I wonder?
The face that appeared on the other side was unforgettable. Though my memories were frozen in my 20s, there was no mistaking the man who stepped out. My husband, Ted. He still wore that friendly smile from back then. Ah. My voice slipped out, but Ted didn't seem to recognize me yet.
Ha! What is the delivery?
Ted glanced around me, noting that I only carried a shoulder bag. And then... What's going on, Ted? A nearly half-naked woman emerged from behind Ted. This was her, Eve McEnroe, 49 years old. Her parents seemed to be rich, and she lived an elegant life here. I recalled the information the detective had given me. She was the woman Ted had been living off since his disappearance. Seeing her face, I regained my composure and anger. I removed my face mask and cap, then addressed the dumbfounded pair. I'm Sophia Astrid. Ted Astrid's wife. Ted stared at my face for a moment, then...
Ah!
He let out a panicked scream and fled deeper into the apartment. Oh dear. As I watched Ted's retreating figure, Eve stood before me. How bold of you to claim to be the wife of a man you haven't seen in years. She crossed her arms, a smug smile playing on her lips. But I couldn't back down now. Likewise, it seems my husband has been quite taken care of all this time. I smiled sweetly and delivered my introduction. Eve continued to scrutinize me, as if examining every inch of my body. Can you explain to me what has happened so far? I asked as if to shake off her gaze, and she told me a story similar to the one the detective had told me. One day, Ted met Eve at a club during a business trip. Impressed by him, Eve brought him to her apartment, which also served as her villa. After that, Ted returned to our home where Maria and I were waiting, seemingly unfazed. However, he started visiting Eve frequently. Gradually, Ted became enamored with Eve's wealth and the pampered lifestyle she provided. Since leaving us that day, he has been living under her care. He no longer resembles the responsible, dignified man he once was. Are you here to reclaim Ted? Her nonchalant tone irritated me. I replied, No, I don't need him anymore. I just have one last thing to do as his wife. Eve cocked her head. My husband, Ted Astrid, and Eve McEnroe. I would like to charge you both for alimony. Eve nodded her head without changing color. How much compensation are you seeking? With a provocative glance, she continued, Name your desired amount. But her expression changed when I uttered the next words. Oops, sorry, the name McEnroe belongs to your family. Miss Field, I'll also consult with Mr. George Field, your husband. With that, I left, knowing that revealing Ted's existence could cause a major scandal. The impact on Eve remains uncertain, but surprisingly, my strategy worked flawlessly. With that, I bowed my head and left the place. I knew from the detective agency's research that Eve had a husband. I heard that he was married to her for political reasons, but if this became known, it would be a serious problem. How much effect this fact would have on her was unknown, but it was surprisingly effective. Don't tell my husband. Eve's cries echoed through the hallway. But I didn't look back and headed for the elevator. She was almost half naked and did not follow me until she ran out into the hallway. I exhaled heavily as the elevator headed toward the ground. Then I walked out and stretched out. Ah, that felt good. People on the street looked at me, but I didn't care. I looked up at the clear blue sky as I made my way to Maria's new home. Through a lawyer, I was able to dissolve my marriage with Ted. Of course, I demanded alimony from both him and Eve. It seemed that Eve's husband and parents chose to sever ties with her. Despite being a well-bred daughter, she had deceived a younger man using her parents' wealth, even though she was already married. Such behavior would have caused significant damage to their prestigious family reputation if it became widely known. Although Eve initially showed willingness to pay the alimony amount I desired, I received more than the court-ordered sum in my account. It appeared that there was not only my remuneration, but also the giving and receiving of money to other people. Where did Ted, abandoned by Eve, who was cut off from her family by her own actions, disappear to? Despite the outstanding alimony owed to me, I had no desire to find out his whereabouts. Mom, is this everything we need to dispose of? Maria carried out the items from the room. She had been helping me with the move, as this house was too large for me to live in alone. Well, I suppose so. Let's take a little break. We sat down and sipped cold iced tea, chatting away. You know, Mom, there's something else I've been keeping from you. I nearly choked on my iced tea. We don't need to discuss that anymore. But Maria's expression remained calm, and her hand rested on her belly. Could it be? I wondered. Yes, Maria was carrying new life within her. And there's one more thing. I saw Dad the other day. She spoke matter-of-factly. During a trip with her husband, she spotted Ted walking around, looking disheveled. It was a 3-hour bullet train ride from here. He must be struggling, but honestly, I didn't feel any desire to help him. I couldn't even believe he was my dad. In Maria's memories, Ted probably still shone brightly. I stood up, wanting to change the subject. All right. Let's put that topic to rest. Back to cleaning. Maria, get rid of anything unnecessary. If only memories and emotions could be discarded as easily. With those thoughts, I continued tidying up the room. And 2 years have passed. Maria's family visited the house I use as both an office and a home. Grandma, your business still seems to be thriving. My granddaughter, still unsteady on her feet, toddled over to me with outstretched arms. Memories of Maria when she was little flooded back, but I pushed away the darker ones. More important than painful memories of the past was what lay before me now. There was no time to dwell on unnecessary things. We still have many joyful and brilliant memories to create. How did you find this story? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Until next time in the next video.